Harmonics, and we wanted to welcome you again to another episode of The Profitable Farmer. And we had an episode yesterday that got canceled because we had a very large grower with a couple thousand hectares who was very interested and wanted to get started, so we had to work with him. But today's episode, I wanted to kind of address something that's been something we've been running into over the last 2.5 years, actually for the last 6 years since we've really been starting this, and that is how to bridge the gap of understanding between what we're doing, what our technology and our product is, to what's existing in the marketplace. As you can probably imagine, something that is a game changer for an industry or something that completely revolutionizes an industry is not always met with complete and ready understanding. It's not always adopted right away, and it's something that people kind of get used to, and then we kind of take it for granted. I'll give you an example. Before these little things came out, these smartphones, Apple created a device called an iPod, right? And it was a new technology that was based upon MP3s, which were sound files, and they were compressed sound files so that they didn't take up that much space. And this technology had already been out for a little while, but the Apple kind of created this new device called an iPod. It had a little dial on it, and you could actually select your songs that you wanted. You can program over 20,000 songs in this device, and then you can go out and listen to your whole music collection in your pocket, right? And it was a huge success. And then a few years later, Apple created one of these, a smartphone, the Apple phone, right, the iPhone, and it became a revolution in communication. We'd already had cell phones, flip phones and these types of things, but the iPhone was the first smartphone, right? It was the first phone that combined not just having phone and text capabilities, but also essentially the power of a computer where you could watch videos, you could do computing things, you can utilize apps like WhatsApp and those types of things, which were relatively new. You can do all kinds of stuff with your phone, and basically have a device that is starting to replace computers. And of course, over the next 12 years, the iPhone has all but replaced computers for most people. A lot of people don't have a laptop like the one I'm communicating on right now. They just have one of these, and it provides all their functions: phone, internet, gaming system, entertainment, email. They put everything on this device, and they operate their life. Farmers actually operate their lives from one of these too. They can change their irrigation schedule, turn their irrigation system for a field on and off. You can monitor the crop and what's happening in the soil or in the crop, and do all kinds of cool stuff just from one of these devices, one of these little smartphones, right? So our technology is a new technology for agriculture that's based upon physics, right? It's not based upon chemicals. It's not based upon the chemical interactions in the plant with nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium, or using chemicals to kill insects and funguses and those types of things. Our technology is using a completely different form of stimulation for the biological functions, and it's based upon a science called biophysics. So in today's episode, I wanted to kind of walk you through the very, very basic, simple definitions and explanations of biophysics, because I want you to really understand how this new emerging technology is not only improving agriculture from our standpoint, from how we are using it to stimulate biological functions in plants, but also how different forms of biophysics can be used to enhance your growth and your potential and other types of things. So let's get started here. I want to share this with you. And first, I want to walk you through how the system works. If I can share my screen here. Here we go. And this definition of biophysics really comes from what is biophysics, right? It comes from the biophysics.org, or the Biophysical Society. So in this particular short web page, which you can go to, and I'm just picking the Biophysical Society. They're not affiliated with us in any way, but they're a really good community of different things, and kind of walks you through how the system works. So biophysics, again, we've defined it as that using the laws of physics to stimulate biological function in plants. And the origins of biophysics really have to do with measurements. How do they measure different biological processes, not just in plants, but with any living thing? They've studied human beings with this. They've studied plants with this. They've studied cells within various types of organisms. They've studied ecosystems with this. They studied how various interactions happen. And there's a level at the physical level of the plant where the physical interactions of these different things take place. And then there's the chemical interaction where these different molecules are having chemical interactions within the plant. And that's part of the biological process too. So a biological process is simply how the organism, the living thing, takes energy and converts energy and utilizes energy in various ways to, continue to survive. But biophysics has been around a long time. It's not something we invented. It's been around actually since the turn of the century. In fact, here it actually talks about in this website how they used biophysics to identify the structure of DNA, right? So all the stuff that they're doing with DNA in the medical field, they started with analyzing and understanding how the building blocks of our DNA affect different things in our structures. And of course, we've been using this for the medical field for decades now. In the plant world, we've been using this in a lot of different ways. Some of this, genetic modifications or GMOs is one branch of this, but it really has more to do with the genetic side of that, and that's not something that our technology gets into. And it looks like computer modeling and these types of things, neuroscience, obviously, bioengineering, as I mentioned before, nanotechnologies, imaging, medical applications, ecosystems, and how to adjust environments. And what do biophysicists do and what do they work at? So all of these different things are in the form of measurements and understanding. It's kind of more of a scientific way of understanding and measuring various things, and the physical interactions that happen within various functions of an organism. In this case, plants is what we're dealing with. Now, the inventor of our technology, the Kyminasi Plant Booster, and I'll mention him here, Fulvio Baumelli, utilized biophysics, this overarching branch of science, to really understand how the biological systems in plants interact with each other in order to generate energy, right? We can look at the chemical interactions in the plant and say, okay, well, I know that a plant needs nitrogen because I can look at the biological processes of photosynthesis and I can see how the plant is utilizing nitrogen as a chemical mineral and how it's taking that nitrogen and utilizing it in various ways to convert one form of energy to another. I can look at the carbon dioxide is another type of mineral that the plants need, right? They need carbon dioxide as an input. And so they can look at how carbon dioxide and water, H2O, interact and how the plant utilizes sunlight to break apart those molecular structures. All that happens at the molecular level, and that becomes a study of chemistry, right? And if you've wondered why in the last 40 or 50 years, 60 years, the entire industry of agriculture has been focused on chemistry, it's because the fastest breakthroughs in the last 50, 60, 70 years have been in the chemical field and looking at how those chemical interactions occur in the plant and determining what kinds of nutrients or what kinds of chemical elements are needed by the plant to make those chemical interactions work and work efficiently. And of course, with the Green Revolution, we've seen how those chemical interactions are super, super important and how we can become very, very successful at increasing yield and improving quality and quantity and production over the last 70 years just by studying chemistry, right? And that would be very good. And that would be very good. I mean, I'm not here to knock any science that happened before us, right? The understanding of chemistry really launched the industry of agriculture and gave it a giant leap forward, which they called the Green Revolution, right, back in the 50s and 60s. And now we're looking at, through the continual advancements of science, we're looking deeper than just those chemical interactions. We're really looking at analyzing how those physical interactions and the laws of physics can benefit and stimulate not just the chemical interactions in the plant, but the overall structure and how we help those biological systems work more efficiently. In fact, there's an interesting study by Bill Gates Bill Gates funded called the Right Project, where they're using genetic engineering to sort of manipulate the photosynthetic process. And I thought that was very interesting and somewhat funny because our technology has already done that without having to splice any genes or do any genetic engineering. We've been able to do that just by looking at the physical interactions of the plant. So Mr. Fulvio Baumelli, who we have on the screen here, is the inventor of this technology. And again, he's been using biophysics and bioresonance specifically to heal a wide variety of human diseases in his clinic in Italy. In fact, he's been doing this for over 30 years. And he got really interested in plant physiology when he realized that the common denominator of human illness and the reason why people got sick and became susceptible to viruses and bacteria and other problems is because of poor nutrition and poor water quality. So he said, look, if I can just fix nutrition and I can just fix water quality, then we can prevent people from getting sick, and then I won't have to spend 24 hours a day trying to heal people once they are sick. Excuse me. So he really studied the last 24 years on plant physiology, but he didn't study it from a chemical viewpoint. He wanted to understand how those different structures within the plant do what they do. For example, when we look at the root system in a plant, what is the primary role of roots? Well, first of all, roots have a physical function in rooting the plant to the spot, so that if a wind comes or even heavy rains or something, the plant is not going to become dislodged from the soil generally, right? Because the roots are holding it in place. The roots also, of course, have the necessary goal of absorbing water and nutrients from the soil. The different things that the plant needs to grow, such as nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, manganese, iron, all these different elements, both macronutrients and micronutrients, the plant absorbs through the soil itself, through the root system. So the roots have a very unique set of functions, right? The roots are not responsible for taking sunlight and converting it to energy for the plant. That's a different type of cell in the leaf system. So, and he analyzed the root system and said, how do we make those plants more efficient? Or when he looked at healthy, productive plants, he noticed, for example, that the cells in the root system, for example, had a very specific frequency. When the roots were performing their function of absorbing water and nutrients efficiently, they operated a very, very tight and narrow set of frequencies, right? And when the roots were not efficient, or the plant was under various forms of stress, he noticed that those biological systems were not at the same frequencies. In fact, they were distorted and irregular. And that happened not just with the root cells, but also with the vascular cells, the cells in the stem or the trunk of a tree. He noticed the same thing within the chloroplast, the cells in the leaves that are designed to collect sunlight and help stimulate those chemical interactions through photosynthesis. He noticed the frequency patterns of those systems were also tuned to very set patterns and would become distorted through stress. So he really picked up on the fact that a healthy, productive plant will have a system of frequencies that allow the plant to convert energy, and all those individual mini biological systems that make up the entire biology of the plant are all tuned to set frequencies. And of course, it makes complete sense from just a common layman's perspective if you think about it. I use the analogy of a human heart. If all those cells in the heart, all those millions and millions and millions of cells in the heart are all beating at the same time and at the same frequency, then the heart itself as a structure will function, and it will pump blood, and it will perform its biological function very efficiently. But what happens when all these cells start to get a little bit off or distorted, or they get mistimed, or they start beating at a different frequency? Well, then the heart itself is going to have a hard time beating and pumping blood, right? That's an example in the human physiology. Well, let's take the cells of the root cells, for example, in a plant. Well, what happens if those roots are timed to the same frequency, and the cell of one is the same frequency as the cell of another? Then what happens is, as water nutrients go from one cell to the next, those cells will be connected to each other, and they're not going to have inefficiencies in terms of how they transmit water and nutrients from one cell to the next, to the next, to the next. And so if all those cells are tuned in time to the set frequency they're supposed to be at, and they're very consistent with each other, then water and nutrients are going to flow through the root system very efficiently. Okay. Another example is, let's say you have a chloroplast in the leaf of a plant, where a chloroplast is a cell that's responsible for, again, collecting sunlight energy and breaking apart chemical bonds within water and carbon dioxide so that they can be recombined into sugar molecules and perform energy or create energy for the plant. That's the entire reason photosynthesis exists, right? And so what happens when those chloroplasts, again, they're supposed to be at a certain frequency to be able to maximize their ability to absorb sunlight and for those chemical interactions to happen. If all those cells are operating at the same frequency and the right frequency relative to the sunlight, then guess what? Those cells are going to function super efficiently, right? But if they're operating at different frequencies or they're not aligned to each other or not aligned in the right way, they're not going to be able to absorb sunlight efficiently. They're not going to be able to break apart those chemical or make those chemical interactions happen. And they're going to produce less energy for the plant. That's just a physical description of what we typically think of when we look at photosynthesis. Yes, photosynthesis is a biological process, but that biological process is composed of hundreds of individual physical processes within the plant. And so what our system is very unique at doing is aligning, those physical interactions within the plant and making them consistent so they operate at the right frequency patterns. And what that does is that it essentially fine tunes the metabolism of the plant so the plant is able to produce the maximum amount of energy with the minimum amount of inputs. And all of this is done through a deep understanding of the physics of how plants function, right? It's very easy to specialize in agronomy or chemistry or genetics or these other things. And of course, all of these different scientific disciplines have an important role in furthering and advancing our understanding and ability to apply these scientific information to a practical application to get better yield and better quality. But our scientist, Mr. Bamelli, has already discovered how we can make the entire system more efficient and how we can get the system to behave as if it was in a perfect environment all the time, even when the environment is not perfect. And it's a very unique and novel approach that reduces the need for chemicals, it reduces the need for fertilizers, and it makes plants more efficient so that you can get more yield, better quality yield with less inputs. And that's the end of the day what we're all about. So I hope this was interesting to you. I didn't see any questions or comments, but if you guys have questions, please put them in the comments here or send us an email at service@harvestharmonics.com. We'd be happy to answer your questions and make sure you understand how this technology works. But more importantly than understanding how it works, in my opinion, is knowing that it works. And the best way to know that it works is to set this up on your farm. Run a small trial if you want to, or just jump on board and get started. But we want to work with as many farmers as we can. We're already in over 30 countries and we want to get to 50. That's our target, is to get to 50 countries by the end of this year and get to 100 by the end of next year. So let's work together. Let's help make this world a better place. But more importantly, let's help you put more money in your pocket and create a better quality product for everybody to eat so that we all win. This is a game where we all can win if we all just work together. It's not us against the farmers or the farmers against the governments or the governments against the people. It's everybody working together for the common good. And the farmers will win, the customers will win, the environment wins, and everybody wins. So if that's the kind of game you want to play and you want to become part of the future of farming today and not wait till tomorrow, then give us a call at 727-324-6750. Send us an email. Send us an email here at service@harvestharmonics.com. Or, of course, you can go to our website and fill out a request for quote form at harvestharmonics.com as well. We'll be happy to work with you in that way. Hope to talk to you guys very soon.